I will not allow the talking points of the Israeli military to become dominant of what happened on that day. Palestinians are subject to a genocidal war. Collective punishment in Gaza is real.
Let me respond. You are the only pro-Palestinian person I've had on the show in 2 weeks who has tried to make out that this just didn't happen on October the 7th, or somehow
you are
was perpetrated.
That's not at all what he said. That's, you know, incredibly disingenuous. I mean, there's bad faith, and then there's that, right? We do have to give credit to Piers Morgan for continuously embarrassing himself publicly for both our amusement and for bringing attention to a very, very serious conflict going on in the world right now. Because, you know, he's been inviting so many people onto his show. Bassem Youssef, which apparently is getting a round 2. So there's going to be a Bassem Youssef versus Piers Morgan second appearance. We've also had Hassan Piker on there. Cenk was on there as well. And now we've got Lowkey. If you don't know, Lowkey is a hip-hop artist who has been a very outspoken advocate in support of Palestinian resistance. And Lowkey now appeared on Piers Morgan's show. This is something of which I've only seen a couple of the clips online, but I have not watched it in its full entirety.
Piers Morgan Uncensored, live from New York City. Well, British Iraqi rapper and pro-Palestine activist Kareem Dennis, better known as Lowkey, has been a powerful and influential pro-Palestinian voice before and during this conflict. The official version of his track Terrorist was taken off YouTube after the Hamas attacks on October the 7th, 14 years after its initial release. He's been highly critical of what he says is media bias and accused me of taking a pro-Israel slant on this show. Well, I'm joined now by Lowkey, who's at our London studio. Lowkey, thank you very, very much indeed for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Piers.
I mean, on the issue of whether I'm pro-Israel, I don't have a horse in this race or this war. I try and be balanced. I try and have all kinds of views. I think we've had more pro-Palestinian people on this show in the last...
I would like to start by saying that Piers is really obsessed with this. Every single time he brings someone who's critical of him on the show, it's always me, you know? I just want you to know that I certainly, you know, have been unbiased, and I brought on many different people, many different, you know, different political backgrounds for sure. What do you have to say about that? About all the nice things that I've been doing? Am I a good boy? I just want to hear you say it. Am I a good boy? Am I finally a good boy?
2 weeks than any other news show in the world, and they'd be getting huge audiences. So I would take issue with that charge that somehow I'm slanted one way or another. I think this whole thing is a complete tragedy. I know that you've been committed to the plight of the Palestinians for a long time, going back at least 15 years from what I can see in terms of you traveling to Gaza. What was your reaction?
To be fair to Piers, he is giving these people voice, and like I said, without question, Piers Morgan, compared to any other major media pundit right now, any other major propagandist right now, has, yes, been platforming a lot of dissenting voices who have come on his show, and they have had an opportunity to talk a lot of truth. So that 100% true. That doesn't change Piers Morgan just like lying through his teeth about a lot of the things that he's actually said or believed or spread, by the way. Like when Bassem Youssef was like, did you not talk or spread stories about the 40 beheaded babies? He was like, no. Has Ben Shapiro ever talked about or spread stories about 40 beheaded babies? No. That's categorically false. But in both cases, by the way, like you can just look it up on the internet, you'll find the clips of you yourself talking about that, and Ben Shapiro talking about that. Like that's just not true.
When you first heard about these attacks on October the 7th?
Well, let's be clear. Reading the testimony of survivors of October 7th from Kibbutz Be'eri, like Yasmin Porat, was extremely harrowing. What she alleges is not only that her husband was killed in the initial takeover, but also she then says that the Israeli military tanks fired on the room where the hostages were, killing 12 Israeli civilian captives. We have also seen fantastic work in the Haaretz newspaper by Amos Harel, where he speaks at length about Brigadier General Rosenfeld, who was in charge of the Haaretz crossing. Now, when this military base was taken over, What he says, Amos Harel, in Haaretz, the well-known Israeli newspaper, he says that Rosenfeld, when he realized that the base was overtaken, called in an airstrike. This is in Haaretz. These are not my words. These are the words of Amos Harel. What we then saw is, since October the 7th, 22 Israeli civilian detainees killed in Gaza by Israeli airstrikes. The Israeli military has something called the Hannibal Directive. The Hannibal Directive was developed in Lebanon in the 80s by the Israelis with the clear understanding that they do not want the other side to take hostages. So, for example, you have the case of Hada Golding in 2014, what Israel called Operation Protective Edge, which killed over 2,200 Palestinians. But when this Israeli soldier was taken captive by the Palestinians, Israel then proceeded to kill everyone, including the civilians in the area around where he was kept and the soldier himself. So what Israel has, unfortunately, is a policy of killing captives. If you look at the case of Gilad Shalit, this was an Israeli soldier.
All right, listen,
allow me to finish. Allow me to finish.
Well,
and don't
you
interrupt
can't just
me.
keep talking. You can't keep talking.
No, I have one last point to make, and I hope that you'll allow me to make it. In the case of Gilad Shalit, what happened was one Israeli soldier led to 1,000 Palestinian prisoners being released. There is a clear understanding within the Israeli military and political elite that they do not want people to be kidnapped. So therefore, they unfortunately, as history has shown us and as the directive within the Israeli military shows, they take action to kill their own captives that have been taken by the other side.
Right, let me respond to you. You tweeted on October the 7th, the arrogance to believe you could keep 2 million trapped in an open-air prison indefinitely, ... That appears to have been your only comment about what happened. So just for the record, do you condemn what Hamas did that day?
We made it 4 minutes. 4 minutes. We got 4 minutes into it before we arrived at that point. So, yeah. You're not able to have a discussion on this unless you've already done it. I'm surprised it wasn't the first question. I guess there's that. You could call that progress, right?
I condemn the genocidal conditions which have created this violence. Every heartbeat, every human heartbeat is sacred to me. And that is what has compelled me to work as I have for the last 15 years to save lives, and stop people dying. Piers.
But that wasn't my question.
No, we do not have a clear picture of what happened on October 7th because, unfortunately, too much of the media has relied on the Israeli military talking points which are given directly to them. Until neutral observers, are able to establish the facts of October 7th, I will not allow the talking points of the Israeli military to become dominant of what happened on that day. Palestinians are subject to a genocidal war. Collective punishment in Gaza is real.
Let me respond. You are the only pro-Palestinian person I've had on the show in 2 weeks who has tried to make out that this just didn't happen on October the 7th or somehow
you are
was perpetrated.
That's not at all what he said. That's, incredibly disingenuous. I mean, there's bad faith, and then there's that, right? Because it's basically like, I'd just like to know whether or not you condemn the actions that occurred on that day. And it's like, well, I condemn the genocidal conditions that led to the violence that we saw that day was the answer. And it's like, well, okay, so I'm going to be honest. You're the first guest that I've had that has actually said that nothing happened. Now I've got my moral posturing set up. Now we can continue, and I can basically condemn you thoroughly for not, condemning Hamas.
You are misrepresenting what I am saying.
Well, I've got 2 questions. They're very straightforward. Do you believe that 1,500 people were slaughtered, including 260 people at a music festival? You're a musician. And secondly, do you condemn the people who did it? They're not difficult
Piers,
questions.
I would like to quote something that you just said to the former spokesperson for the IDF. This was your exact sentence not long ago. You said, it's difficult to tell between combatants and non-combatants. So the implication of what you said was somehow it was understandable that Israel has killed a Palestinian child every 15 minutes in Gaza.
I didn't say that.
For the last. No, but somehow they couldn't tell that those children were not combatants, according to you.
No, I didn't say that.
It's understandable.
I didn't say that, and I have said that it is absolutely appalling, the number of children who are dying in Gaza. It's appalling, and it will get worse. I make no bones about that at all.
And I have to say,
but you have to start. You have to start surely from a humanity point of view. I can absolutely express my horror at the deaths of Palestinian innocent civilians, as I have done many times over the years. I think it's horrifying. And I think this is why I have a serious problem with the proposed ground invasion, because I think it will create unbelievably large numbers of civilian casualties, and I'm not sure that the strategy will work. But I'm just curious why you, who is... I know you care about people. I know you care passionately about the Palestinian civilians, but you're the only pro-Palestine voice I've had who's even tried to suggest that what Hamas did on October the 7th was not as bad as we think. So is that what you think?
What do we think? But what do we think?
I'm sorry, I missed that part. When did he say that? Like, he responded with, I want to put this in context kind of response, rather than just directly, you know, answering you and the question you posed, right? But like, I haven't heard him say what Piers is making it out that he has said.
The information is not clear. As I've said to you, all human life is sacred.
Hamas haven't even tried to hide it.
It's sacred. But I'm not trying to hide anything. You're trying to hide something.
No, with respect, you are definitely trying to dissemble here, and I'll explain why. I've given you an opportunity to simply say whether you condemn what Hamas did, which, by the way, they have brazenly boasted about. They posted videos celebrating what they did. There is no doubt about what Hamas did. They want you to know what they did. They want me to know that. They want the world to know. They killed Jewish people in the main and in Israel with impunity. 260 people at a music festival. Babies, grandmothers. They kidnapped 200 people. God knows what's happened to them. Now, you can shake your head, but what you can't do is deny that that happened, because Hamas have admitted it brazenly. And
I think maybe a more effective strategy for a Piers Morgan audience is what you've seen other people do, which is just immediately acknowledge, because of course, yes, absolutely horrifying civilians who are being killed by Hamas in this conflict. You know, if it is a requirement to be able to discuss this before we even have a conversation, then yes, I 100% without, you know, reserve condemn the actions on that day. And I don't believe that conflict began that day. And I don't believe that utilizing, either war crimes, horrors, or atrocities committed against civilians can justify then a obscenely disproportionate now complete leveling of entire blocks, the thousands of children being killed, entire civilian populations being cut off from all food, medical supplies, fuel, water. That to respond to an act like that with infinitely more suffering, where does that leave us, and where would anyone want to justify that kind of activity or behavior?
With
I have publicly stated,
and secondly, if they've admitted it, do you condemn what they did?
I absolutely mourn the loss of all human life in this conflict, and I have struggled for 15 years of my life in a way that, Piers, to be honest, you haven't, okay? And I take you as an empathetic person with a high level of emotional intelligence, okay? I have struggled for 15 years of my life to stop the killing, for a ceasefire now, to stop deaths. But I have to say, Piers, that actually this line of questioning, unfortunately, on a personal level, is somewhat hypocritical, and I'll explain why. On April 18th, 2022, you said the exact phrase that you feel like Nelson Mandela walking out of prison on the long road to freedom of speech. Today, there is a statue for Nelson Mandela outside Parliament. Now, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, Beit Salim, and even the Harvard Law School have said that Israel practices apartheid against the Palestinian people. Do you know what the ANC struggle against apartheid entailed? Are you aware that the ANC are believed to have very unfortunately, horrifically, and terribly taken the lives of children and civilians in their struggle against apartheid? So, Piers, you seem absolutely content to not only compare yourself to Nelson Mandela, who served 27 years in jail for what they described as terrorism at the time, but yet you cannot see what the vast majority of human rights organizations in the world see when they look at the Palestinians. When you look at UN Resolution 194, paragraph 11, the Palestinians have the right to return home. Almost a million of them were displaced in 1948 with the foundation of the State of Israel. And what we are now on the brink of is Palestinians, millions of them, being driven into the Sinai Desert with help of the US Delta Force,
yeah, but Lowkey,
with help
let me
of the
jump
British.
In. Let me jump in.
A manufactured, an Israeli-manufactured humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. There is a 23% infant mortality rate in Gaza.
Let me say something. I completely agree with you about the plight of the Palestinian people. I've tweeted about this for the last 2 weeks.
No, to be fair, you haven't, Piers, and this is not journalism. Shireen Abu
Well, then you haven't read my
was
tweets.
journalism. Yasser Mortaja was journalism. Mu'taz Azaiza, that's journalism. Palestinians are reaching out from the cage that Israel has put them in, and they are trying to speak to the world.
Yeah,
and they are being met. They are being met
fine.
with cold indifference. And I would say to you, Piers, I would say to you that gentleman that you've just had on the show, Mark Regev, he belongs in The Hague. David Petraeus, you know, Piers, you made your reputation as opposing the invasion of Iraq. Well, I would ask you, journalist to journalist, how could you justify the interview you just gave to the head of US forces in that illegal occupation of Iraq that David Petraeus led? He was then the head of the CIA. Both of the individuals that you have just had on this show deserve to be in The Hague, tried for war crimes. I am not anything like them. I have not hurt a fly. Those two men have. Why are they given the respectability that you gave them with your interview? And why am I interrogated as if I am somehow someone that could hurt a human being?
Well, certainly in Mark Regev's case, I pushed him hard on all the positions Israel is currently adopting.
That wasn't hard.
Let me explain. Because I did a tweet today, and I meant every word of this. I said, I have great respect for anybody who in the immediate aftermath...
Why does he keeps making this about himself, you know? Like, are you just bringing on all of these guests to try and absolve you, or to try to get someone to say that you're good, you know? Yeah, you're a good person, Piers. You put out like a both sides tweet. Oh yeah, you said that you feel bad about what's happening to children in Gaza right now. That's, yeah, you know, you're doing your job all right. You certainly are.
Of this appalling terror attack, said it was outrageous and appalling.
There are 1,500 Palestinians still under the rubble in Gaza.
Exactly. You've had your say.
They're still under the rubble, Piers. They're still under the rubble. You're not bringing them up with that.
I said those whose instinctive reaction was not to feel that, and I think you're one of them, because your reaction was to say the arrogance to think you could keep 2 million people trapped in an open-air prison indefinitely, as if somehow that justified what happened that day.
Piers,
it didn't justify what happened that day.
You know exactly what you're doing.
And you should be able...
The point when that tweet was sent, you had not seen anything had happened.
You've had your criticism of me, and that's fine. You're perfectly entitled to it. Like I said to you, or you said about me, I believe in free speech. You're entitled to your opinion of me, of David Petraeus, of Mark Regev. But I'm also entitled to judge you as somebody who did not find it in themselves to express anything involving any outrage or any...
I've just expressed it. And Piers, this is not journalism. The idea of us comparing our moral compasses, and somehow I have a deficient moral compass. Somehow I am a moral monster. You know what's true? You know what's true is I am not. The people that have shown a cold indifference to the ethnically cleansed Palestinians, dispossessed, 1 in 3 every refugee in the world is Palestinian. They are the largest refugee population. Those who have turned a blind eye to their suffering are those that need to be seriously interrogated.
Oh, that is the cutoff right there. That's wow. And at this moment, he's just spitting facts. Like, whatever happened to the whole appealing to humanity, Piers?
About their moral compass. And I would ask you before we end the show, I would ask you that I'm able to read out the names of the 20 Palestinian journalists that have been killed in Gaza.
Because I have two more guests.
So you're censoring me.
Have 8 minutes for them. We have 4 left.
It's 20 journalists. So I'm being censored now. And I'll tell you something else.
You're not being censored.
This badge, zoom in on this badge. This badge was given to me by an employee of this building who said they were told they could not wear this badge because it was the Palestinian flag. You talk about uncensored. This is censored.
Wow, that is a very strong call out.
This badge
I haven't told anybody
from an employee in this building.
I have told nobody they can or can't wear a badge.
Yeah, by the way, the whole uncensored thing, you know, at the very start of the Bassem Youssef interview, he has to, there's like this warning that pops up that's like just, you know, content warning, this will contain profanity or something like that. I was like, wait, isn't this show uncensored? What? Why, you could bleep it or something. Why you gotta warn people about that? You're gonna be talking about horrifying war crimes, atrocities. We're talking ethnic cleansing, starvation, all that kind of stuff. But don't say fuck, because that would be obviously a little too much.
That's a ridiculous thing to say. I'm in New York, but good to see you, Lowkey. I appreciate you coming on the program.
Wow, censored, just cut off immediately, huh? Well, yeah, I mean, like, what can you really say? Once again, Piers Morgan brings on someone who has opposing views to his own, introduces them, immediately wants them to know that he's one of the good ones. He's the only person who's willing to actually bring on other people who have dissenting opinions. And I mean, that's the only thing to which you could probably give him credit. He is bringing on people who are obviously his detractors or his critics or are people who are politically opposed to him. He's platforming them, and then within the first, you know, this time we made it to 4 minutes, but at the 4-minute mark, it's basically like, do you condemn the horrifying actions that occurred on that day? And the fact that you haven't condemned them yet is enough for me now to, again, do moral grandstanding and be like, I find it just absolutely abhorrent that you refuse to condemn that. Here I'm going to, you know, specifically mention some of the horrifying things that happened on that day, and why won't you acknowledge that they're bad? Why don't you think, you know, in this case, if it happens to be Israeli citizens that were killed, that it's bad, and you know, obviously shame on you, and I'm a good boy, and I'm the only person who's actually talking about this, you know, from both sides. I'm both sides in this one proudly, and you know, I'm not for censorship. And then meanwhile, you know, Lowkey's there being like, this was actually handed to me by one of your staff members saying they couldn't wear a Palestinian flag. They've been censored for doing that, you know. That's yeah, that's wild. Well, I mean, hey, Piers, I hope you continue this. I hope we continue to see, you know, episode after episode where this is the kind of, you know, content. Bring on more. Prove to all of us how big of a detractor you can be.
Do you enjoy the Serfs but prefer not to have to use your eyeballs? Many are saying this. Well, we've got the solution for you. It's the Serf Times in podcast form. Available on most major podcasting networks now. If you enjoy it, please consider leaving a good review and feedback because it really helps the show out, apparently, and it's free, just like the podcast.
Thank you so much for watching, everybody. This show is produced by amazing people like you, and if you want to help us out, please consider donating over at patreon.com/theserfs. The show is made possible thanks to Amazing Fletch, Anna Loves Riley, Ariane McCarthy, Cheryl Alvarez, Doug Cady, Everything Important, Hagbard Celine, Lamidia Panza, Matthew Scarborough, Multimondi, Omni, Peanut Butter Blondie, Political Pappy, Quiet 185, Rachel K, Riley and Anna, Roller Dragon, Ruby K, Sir Nickus, Spinach Monster, Stellar Vision, Sebastian Demo, Tech Tink, Trevbot EXE, Words Greenwood, and not to mention all of the amazing and fabulous people you now see before you.